Excellent. While you all are introducing yourselves, I'm going to go ahead and get us started with an introduction. My name is Jadinette Santos. I'm the Political Pipeline Director here at She Should Run. And for those of you who are not familiar with She Should Run, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that is working to dramatically increase the number of women running for office. We work with this challenge that we know exists, that not enough women are running, and because women aren't running, they are underrepresented in political office. And so our solution to that is by providing data-driven content, education, and collective action to get more women excited about the possibility of running for office. This Road to Run series is highlighting 6 cities across America to talk about different topics that women in our community have highlighted as of importance to them. So this is our third of those 6 cities. We're highlighting Utah, Salt Lake City specifically, but we ended up with change to virtual settings. I'm able to highlight the entire state. And today we're focusing on finding balance. So while we're all in the middle of a global pandemic, various reactions to that, the challenges have driven us all to work from home, while simultaneously some of us are homeschooling children. Maybe we're caring for the elderly or sick parents in our homes. Maybe we're supporting or participating in the essential workforce. Everything is up in the air and people are responding in different ways. While this crisis has put a spotlight on the need for women to be highlighted in political spaces, it's definitely also highlighted our work that we put into our homes, that we put into our families, and that we put into our communities. There was an op-ed last week by Melinda Gates, and I'll read this quote that she included. She said, "Women have been wearing these hats, these multiple hats, their whole lives. They saw their mothers struggle to care for the kids and have employment and get an education. Women know the barriers, they've lived the barriers, and women have always been up against in society. They see the needs of our kids and elderly parents. They've been trying to hold it together and make it work. And they're finally saying, we can do this in a smart way and in a compassionate way, and we can take care of everybody. We need far more women and people of color in Congress, in our state houses, and when we have people living in today's society who understand the stresses on families, they are the ones who can help us pass the right policies we need to have them in these positions of power." And we so agree with that as we have more women pursuing public office, that the experiences that women have had are going to better inform policies to get us the right actions for each of our communities and our families. An interesting fact as we're highlighting Utah today, Utah ranks 33rd out of 50 states for women's representation. So today we've invited 3 phenomenal women in public office in Utah to be able to talk about their experiences, what it was like to beat the odds in their state and be able to achieve public office in the first place, how they're juggling the demands of their personal lives and bringing their experiences with them into how they're leading their communities. So we will hear from Mayor Michelle Kaufusi of Provo, County Councilmember Shireen Ghorbani of Salt Lake County, and City Councilmember Kat Martinez. I will have each of them do a brief introduction of themselves, so you'll get a little bit better opportunity to hear them. Before we pass it to our speakers, I just want to mention, as you may have seen in the registration, we are a nonpartisan that really puts our heart into our work. And through these virtual engagements, we make them available at no cost to any of our participants. However, they do take a lot of energy and resources for our team to make happen. If you would like to participate in providing a donation, some of you already did that in the registration process. We're so grateful to you for that. There is a virtual Pass the Hat that you can participate in. The link is in the chat. If at any point today you feel like you would like to make a contribution to us making these virtual events available to all of you, feel free to participate with that link there. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our speakers who are joining us. We will first hear from Mayor Kaufusi, then County Councilmember Shireen Ghorbani, and then finally City Councilmember Kat Martinez. And ladies, as you introduce yourselves, we would love to hear a bit about your background and also what prompted you to run for public office.
Hey, I'll get started. Hi, I am Mayor Michelle Kaufusi. I'm the mayor of Provo City. Just a little bit about the city of Provo for those that aren't familiar, which is probably a majority. We're about 125,000. Our city started in 1847 There were 44 wonderful men mayors ahead of me, and I'm the 45th mayor, and I'm the first woman mayor. So it's been a wonderful experience and a huge learning curve for everyone because I work with all men. It's interesting and fascinating, and I love it. A little bit about how I got into government and becoming a public servant, because that's how I see myself, is serving the public. Actually, I was doing an interview yesterday and they figured out how many years I had held an elected office, and they said, this is your 10th year. And I was like, wow, I can't believe it's been 10 years. But that's not even the most important part. The most important part is all the years prior to that, where I was just a volunteer and just trying to make our community more united and better. Those are the parts that really matter. Those years where you're down in the trenches and you just really aren't doing it for any other reason than to serve your community or the children in the school systems. Was born and raised in Provo. I came from a unique situation. I came from a pretty rough home, especially for those who think of Provo. I mean, we picture Provo and everyone has a dad, and everyone's dad is either a doctor or professor at Brigham Young University. And there was 7 of us that were rugrats and had a single mom that worked the graveyard shift at the hospital to provide, and a dad that was an alcoholic and in jail a lot. And eventually she got brave enough and divorced when I was about 10, and just spent a lot of time being that free and reduced lunch kid, but wanting to be the kid that fits in and wanted to be just treated like everybody else, but worked really hard. We learned to work hard by the time we were young. Everyone had to contribute to the family. And I think that idea of service and giving back, it really hit home to me. I left and went back east and was back there for a while in Philadelphia, and then in Salt Lake City for 10 years, and then worked my way back to Provo. And the minute I landed here, I knew I wanted to serve the community that served me so well. So that's just a little bit about me.
Excellent, thank you. And then Shireen, we'll hear from you next.
Hi, I'm so excited. So many of you are joining us today. It's fun to see people from all over the country in this time that we're so disconnected. I'm County Councilwoman Shireen Ghorbani. I serve Salt Lake County, which is a third of the population of the state of Utah. So about 1.2 million people live in Salt Lake County, and I serve at large. So I serve the whole county. It's an immense privilege, and I certainly also think about it in terms of service, a way to give back. My upbringing was also a little different. Before I was a Utahn, I was a North Dakotan. I was raised in Bismarck, North Dakota by a single mom, a working mom. She was an educator. My father was an immigrant to this country from Iran and struggled with alcohol and addiction most of my childhood. And by the time I was 6, it was just my mom and I out there on the prairie. And a lot of my commitment to public service really came from her, the experience growing up in a tight-knit community, one that I feel really replicated across many communities here in Salt Lake County. You know, I served in the United States Peace Corps, have been involved in boards and different nonprofit work over the years. I'm an associate director of communication and training in facilities management at the University of Utah, a job that I still hold while I serve in a part-time capacity on the county council, but it's certainly not part-time work. My path to running for office was really born out of an experience of grief and frankly rage. I lost my mom to pancreatic cancer in 2016. She was diagnosed in June and she took her last breath in August. And in that period of time, I just saw how quickly families can lose everything with one diagnosis. I'm very upset about the conditions of healthcare and access to healthcare, and decided to do something pretty drastic. I ran for the United States House of Representatives in an incredibly beautiful and diverse district that stretches from just north of this county, so kind of north of Salt Lake County, all the way down to the Arizona border and out to Nevada as well. So I got to travel, meet so many people across this incredible state. And what I found really was, and what I appreciate about this organization is that regardless of, most people aren't partisans. Most people are looking for solutions in their communities. They're looking for people who care about them, who want to make their communities better, as Mayor Kaufusi mentioned. And it's just been such an honor to serve. So that's a little bit about my path to politics. Didn't win that congressional race, ran for the county council in a special election, and now have the just immense honor to serve.
Beautiful, thank you. And then we'll hear from Kat.
Hi, so my name is Kat Martinez, and I am so honored to be with you today. I was raised in Casper, Wyoming, and came here to Utah to go to the University of Utah. My path was always very community service oriented and education. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher growing up, and taught middle school for several years. And the big fork in the road for me came when we had our second child, and I realized we couldn't afford childcare. And it had never occurred to me to do anything but be a teacher. And when we realized that we couldn't afford, my salary was less than 2 in daycare, I opened my own childcare. And from there realized that profession was so underrepresented in advocacy, from funds to policy, and started joining advisory committees and sort of like one after another, and getting on professional associations, trying to represent the field, and just feeling like these working parents weren't being heard and served, and myself as a woman who wanted to run a business and take care of my children at the same time wasn't being served. And so then I started going to more city council meetings and looking around the room, from someone who always thought, well, I'm just a teacher, to looking around and thinking, you know what, I have a lot to bring to the table here. And those that are representing me, they're not necessarily smarter, they're not necessarily more educated. I have as much right to be here. And it was a real sort of eye-opener. And so a couple years ago, I was able to transition. I closed my family childcare that I ran for 6 years. My youngest got old enough to go to kindergarten, so we didn't have to worry about paying for childcare anymore. And we're very privileged in having family help, which a lot don't. I have a full-time job as well, as Councilman Shireen Ghorbani, and I work full-time for the Utah Health Department. So we've been busy lately. And my council position that I was elected to in January is as Shireen said, part-time. And so balancing those roles along with my 3 children, and yeah, so kind of my windy road to policy and advocacy.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for being so candid with us and sharing really intimate parts of your lives. I know that they are what propelled you to where you are now, but it's also really touching to hear you all speak so candidly and so authentically. So we're going to jump right into this Q&A panel that we're hosting today. Some of these questions were curated from all of the attendees who are here today as you filled out questions during the registration. Some of them are from our community, things that we've heard consistently. And so we'll just get right into it. One of the number one things that we hear is that people are interested about getting involved in politics. They're curious about what could happen, but they have no clue where that starting place is and how to identify it and then pursue it. I had the great fortune of being able to speak with the 3 of you prior to this engagement. And Kat, you had some great things to add here about a good starting place in getting involved. So wondering if you could share a bit about that.
Yes, I think that where do I start question is so huge. And a lot of women don't realize they're already started. Whether you volunteer in your child's classroom, are you on the PTA, are you on the community council, do you volunteer, at the local food pantry? Like, what do you do that's involved in your community? And every act, whether it's community service or, just volunteering in some sort of way, if you're having those connections in your community, you're building your base, in election vocab of, building your base, building your community who would help support you in something like that. But you're also learning about what type of problems your community is facing and how best to move forward with that. So don't undervalue what you're already doing. A lot of the time, work we're doing in the community isn't paid in the same way as men. And that was actually part of what led me to run too. I was on so many volunteer boards and committees. And my husband was in grad school, and I was like, we can't afford for this to be volunteer work anymore. I got to get paid for this. And putting that value that you deserve that. You deserve that value. You deserve just yeah, to be honored for that work you're already doing. So just kind of open up your view of what that work is.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I love how much that connects to getting a better exposure to your community. There's something that we share about the women who come to us, that because you care, you are qualified. And it's understanding that you're an advocate for your community, an advocate of someone of your experience, to be able to go and share that. So thank you for that, that tidbit there, Kat. I see some people wondering about what to do with questions. If you look at the bottom of the screen where all of our videos are, you should see an opportunity that says Q&A, and it has two little question bubbles. If you would like to submit a question, we'll get to that in a little bit. You can type your question into that Q&A, and I'll include those in today's conversation. Where we're going next, so as we talked about with Kat, right, the idea of getting involved in community things, these volunteer opportunities, attending city council meetings, a lot of women share that they already feel like they have too much on their plate. And we know from research that women bear the brunt of emotional labor, whether that be the passion that they are investing in their community, or maybe different labor that they're taking on at home, whether that be, again, coming to childcare or elderly parent care. And so the ways that this emotional labor shows up can sometimes be a barrier to women thinking that they have the opportunity to pursue that type of service. Shireen, you had a lot to say. I think you used the word cried all over the state when you talked about emotional labor. I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience balancing emotional labor.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is so incredible about stepping into this space and kind of throwing your hat in the ring, saying, I want to be a part of this community in this way, I want to lead in this way, is people really do start to see you as a leader. And they come to you with all sorts of questions, concerns, challenges that they face day to day. And as I mentioned, I really ran from a place of grief. I'd lost really the most important person in my life growing up. I would get emotional just talking about it. And I just let that be part of my experience of running. I never hid from it. I didn't shy away from it. And I just kept working through it. And frankly, worked through a lot of my personal grief in that experience. But more than that, I think it opened me up to be able to take in, hear, think about other people's challenges around really emotional topics. We have high rates of addiction in our community. We have high rates, unfortunately, of suicide. I just remember, especially knocking on doors in that congressional race, I would talk a little bit about what mattered to me, introduce myself to voters, and they would, sometimes we would end the conversation and then I would hear the door open and they would say, I want to talk to you about losing my son to addiction, or I want to talk to you about the fear that I have for my undocumented friends or neighbors, or I've lost my job and I don't see a pathway for me. And that kind of openness for me became both a big weight to carry. It's a lot to carry when you really know about what people are suffering through and experiencing in your community, but it's also a place to really dig deep, get informed, and start thinking about practical solutions. So I think we have to frame our emotions and the emotional space that we share, whether it's, and sometimes it's as simple as the maybe fear that we have about talking about politics, that we're afraid it's going to blow up into this situation that many people don't want to engage in, but really talk about core issues that people are facing or core values that they have when they think about what they want reflected in their leadership, in their community, in their home. And you can create a lot of really powerful connections to people from all different kinds of backgrounds with that. But I do think we have to be honest about the toll that it can take, and also what elements of your own emotional life you're ready to bring to the table, or have be part of that process, and some that you aren't, and that's okay. People need to have boundaries, and that's important. But I think that we need to, especially as women, see our emotional strength, as power.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love what you talk about, leaning into this strength, leaning into the fact that you're going to lead differently, and that you have experiences that might look like these people that you're going to serve, and using that as a way to build connection rather than something that holds you back. We're going to shift to hear from you, Michelle. You are the first woman to serve as mayor in Provo. I think you said it was 44 men had served before you. Curious to hear about what your experience was like with that, both in the campaigning side and then coming in and serving in this office as a new take on what this office can look like. Curious on ways that you might lead differently, or maybe any challenges that you might have faced on the road getting there.
Yeah, so I was actually the board president of public education when somebody tapped my shoulder and said, hey, you ought to run for the mayor seat in Provo. And I'm sure all of you that are on the call that have held seats or thinking of it have friends that do that, and they push you to the front and then you turn around and they're gone. So they pushed me to the front. It struck my curiosity as to why the city of Provo, which is a fairly good-sized city and a vibrant city, and it's a home to a major university, why hadn't a woman been able to hold this seat? So that was the question that wouldn't leave my mind. So like I handle everything, I just got busy and went to work, and I came down and talked to the recorder and said, all right, I need to know everything about the city. You need to tell me the demographics for voting and for women, and how many women have filed and how many women have run for mayor. And she actually took me out in the hall and just kind of said, Michelle, you have no idea how unique this is. I have no information to give you because we've never had a woman mayor, and the tracking of women hasn't been great in Provo. So I was just so thrown back by that. And I have to be really honest, I was a little disappointed. I thought we're better than that in this city. And so I actually walked to the mayor's wall just because I really had to convince myself that this, I mean, here we were in this era and never had a woman. And sure enough, 44 wonderful, staunch, black and white photos of great men were on that wall. And that was the trigger. I thought, okay, so even though I still have one more year left on the Board of Education, I'm just gonna work really hard at both jobs and see where it lands. And I did, me and my whole family. I'm a mother of 5, and we all went to work, and because campaigns really are a family affair. It impacts everybody and everybody works. Worked really hard, and we were able to land the seat. And still, like, I'm getting goosebumps right now because I still feel so honored and privileged to hold this seat, because I know it's not my seat, it's the citizen seat. But as she mentioned, it didn't come without a few issues. People wrote op-eds stating Provo wasn't ready for a woman mayor. And people, I mean, I'm sure you're all kind of the same, kind of this leadership is in you. And so when someone says you can't do it, you do better and harder and push more. And my mom hated that about me, but that's how I was, and it's my personality. So we went to work, and I actually, on my second day in the office, I won on November 7th, and it was a unique election. The former mayor is Congressman Curtis, who was running for a unique election as well, and he won. So I got 30 minutes with him, and he left back to DC, had to vote on the floor. I stepped in the seat 2 days after I won the election and never looked back. And I heard, and my office was all men. Every director in the city was a man. Every meeting I sat in was anywhere between 4 and 17 men around the table, and I was the only woman. I had one of my staffs say the third day I was in the office, what is that noise? And it was me. I was laughing on the phone at the same time, working on my laptop, and had the door open. And so after I just went in and sat down with them and said, you know, that's what we call women. That noise you hear, and you guys are really used to this. Come to work, shut your door, do your job, leave for an hour, go to lunch, come back, shut your door, open your door, and walk out at the end of the day. And so I immediately put into policy, open door policy, and if you don't, I'll have your doors removed, because we're changing everything in this city. We are going to be collaborative. And I immediately started hiring women and plugging them in. And I'll tell you the secret sauce, though, to this working with all men. It's, and both Kat and Shireen have touched on it because they experience it, I'm sure, every day. It's relationships. and that face-to-face time where you look them in the eye and listen and learn. And I think they were a little bit worried. They'd never had a woman in here. They don't know what to do. I mean, look, I brought in pink flowers. I mean, I changed the whole thing. This used to be a mural of stampeding horses behind me. It was gone. But we bring a whole different way about how we manage and how we lead. And it just took a little while for them to understand. And the secret sauce is, if you can win men over, they are so loyal to you. The people I work with, I don't even have to say a word, because if anyone comes up against me publicly or in the paper, I have 15 men that jump on to protect and defend. And don't say that about our mayor. She said this because this, and here's the backstory. And honestly, relationships really matter, and trust.
Thank you so much for that, Michelle. I think that it's so interesting, right? That in addition to taking on this new office and a new exciting time for you as an individual, to also have to combat these preconceived notions. I love what you said, that noise, what you're hearing is what we call women, and combating these ideas that people have that this is not your place, or not something that they're used to, that this is something that's going to bring better things for the community. I'm seeing a lot of questions in the Q&A, and I'm really excited about that. We will get to those in just a moment. I do have a couple questions from the registrations that I want to make sure we address, because I see them so often. This one I'll ask of each of you, because I think that each of your experience has probably been somewhat different or unique. Mayor Kaufusi, you got to this a little bit when you talked about running. People ran op-eds about Provo not being ready for a woman mayor. I'm curious if there were any specific barriers that each of you experienced in your campaign time, whether that be about your gender, if it was about any racial issues, if it was about any income issues or history, how you combat the barriers that came your way. We'll start with Shireen, then go to Mayor Kaufusi, then go to Kat, if that's okay.
So I think the financial component is one we have to be really clear about. I don't come from, I don't have family wealth. I don't have, large connections to big pockets of money. And I really, when I first ran, I just called everyone in my phone and started asking for 10, 15, $20, asked if people could do it monthly, and on a congressional race, just gutted it out. Ultimately just kept that practice going, got to a place where through just some national attention from some groups that were organizing for candidates in places with low media costs, ultimately was able to raise just shy of half a million dollars. So I think it was $490,000, which hadn't been raised in that district by a Democrat since it had been, the district lines had been redrawn. But it was a Herculean task, and it was something that I felt just awful doing. It wasn't my favorite part of running for office. We have to ask for what we need. And that means in finance, in raising money, in getting support from, our community, whatever that looks like. I have a now 5-year-old who was, 3 and 4 for a lot of the time I was running. And frankly, I missed a lot of time with him. I'm lucky to have a partner who, my husband is a teacher and was able to spend a lot of time supporting in our family environment, but I don't have extended family here. So it's us, it's our friends, it's people that we ask for help and who get on board. But what I found is the more I just started letting people know what I needed, the easier it was to navigate those waters and get support. So I guess maybe I've jumped off of some of the other questions, but I want to just say that's a really difficult part of this. We know there's a lot of research that shows that women, and in particular women of color, have a much harder time raising money. So there's something everyone on this call can do. If you're thinking about running, you're thinking about getting involved, look around and find women who are of color and start giving them that $5 a month, a little more if you can. Those donations are critical, especially in smaller races.
Yes, thank you. And again, yeah, thank you for addressing. This is a barrier that people talk about all the time. How do I fundraise? It's awkward to ask for money. Thank you for addressing that barrier. Again, we'll hear from Mayor Kaufusi next. Any barriers that you might have experienced and what you did to come against them, whether that be attacks in the media, financing, managing family, and running, whatever barrier that maybe stuck out to you.
So Shireen was right on. Asking for money is the worst. It is so awkward to do, and you also have to be so careful because you don't want to be tied to any commitments, or every time you take money, you have to be very clear with them that this doesn't mean if you bring a huge development to my city that I'm going to say yes to this. I mean, there's a lot that goes with the money piece. So thank you for addressing that, Shireen. It's the rough part of campaigning, but it is critical. As far as maybe some obstacles, I always would tell, and my kids, they're all active on social media, and we're very protective, and so is my husband, of anything anyone say. But I just said, I will fire you from this family if you get on Twitter and go to bat for me. I do not need that. And just reminded them all the time to stay out of the fray. And if I could give you any advice, I would say stay out of the fray. Don't get sucked down those black holes of negativism. And we just basically, because there was a lot coming at us, and in all channels, we just focused on what I had the control over, which was knocking doors, meeting people, holding cottage meetings. We put all our energy into what we were doing to win the seat and stayed out of the fray. And that really served us well. Just one other quick piece. So I, not only being a woman, but also I married an immigrant, and he's hilarious and adorable. I've been married for 32 years. He's a Tongan. And so that was a little bit of a hurdle to knock on doors and say, my name is Michelle Kaufusi. Well, where does that name come from? What does that even mean? And so that was also, actually I saw it as a positive, because I was able to kind of tell his story of why his family were immigrants and migrated from Tonga to America and the reasons they came here. It kind of, you have to learn your story, and you have to be able to tell it quick, and you have to be able to fold it all in so that by the time you're off that front porch and you've had your 4 minutes, you've hit some really key points.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm really loving the diverse responses we're getting to this question. Thank you all for being so widespread in your responses. Kat, we'll give it to you to round us up on this question.
All right. I love just that you have to know your story, because our stories are complicated. So it's really hard to distill them down into something that can be shared so clearly and still truthfully, but in a way that's not overly complicated, because we are complicated. The money was a huge obstacle. As I mentioned, my husband was in grad school. He graduated 2 weeks ago. Yay. But that was a long road. I had someone ask me, have you thought about running for a state Senate seat? And I said, oh, no, that's way bigger than I'm looking right now. And they said, well, surely you can just call your parents and ask for $50,000. And I spit out my drink full on cartoon style. Like, no, I don't just have that money sitting around. And that was odd to this person. They just thought, oh, surely you just have some money sitting around, you can throw out this race. And so sort of, where are you starting from? But like Shireen said, you have to ask for what you need. When we set our city council race goal budget, we looked at previous races in the area in similar size and what we'd need to raise for that. And then just ask. What helped me feel good about asking was I'd helped my state house representative with several races before I ran. And it felt so good to knock doors for her. And it felt so good to give her $20 when I could, to know that people want to help. And when you ask someone to donate to your race, you're giving them a way to be involved. You're giving them a way to help. They might not be ready to run yet. So it's a gift. And I had to really, say that over and over again to myself to make it feel better. Another roadblock, I guess not roadblock, but just kind of part of my story I had to be really comfortable with was we're renters. And we had a lot of negative in the community about, you don't even own a house. How can you run for city council if you don't own a house? I was like, excuse me? And so just getting really comfortable with That's right, because a lot of people my age don't own a house and aren't able to. And that's doesn't have to be who we are in the community. And so just really practicing my story with that. And similarly, with your story of being really comfortable in your identity and what your values are. I had to really get comfortable. For city council, I was like, I want to fix sidewalks. I want to make sure we push ADA accessibility hard. You know, that's what I was excited about. But what I got dragged for was my involvement with Planned Parenthood. And I will never apologize for that, because volunteering with the teen moms group that Planned Parenthood plugged me into was one of the best ways I ever spent every Tuesday night of a year. And I'll never apologize for my values with that. And some people on the call might be like, that would be a deal breaker for me on a candidate I would support, which is fine. But I had to get really comfortable with that when I wasn't ready for that fight on this big political realm, because I was running for city council, right? Like, I want to make sure our dogs don't bark at night, but we're allowed to have the pets our families want. Like, that's what I want to do. But I had to really reconcile. And the worst fight, not fight, I guess I felt like it was a fight, you know, when you're like fight or flight, even though it's not, was at a door when someone said, I won't vote for you because you support LGBT rights. And I was like, this is city council. Like, we're not going to make everyone gay, Mary, and Murray. Like, that's not going to happen. But they said, no, I won't vote for you, even though this, and this, I love that you're involved in the community. But so even things that you feel wouldn't be applicable to what you're running for, you just have to get really comfortable. And this is who I am. Not everyone's going to like me, even if it doesn't have to do with what we're talking about. And just like really finding peace in that. And if it's what you believe in, that's right. That's who you are. Really stick to it. Is you don't see it coming, especially on some of those
I think that's a good
issues.
point too about owning your values. I think that's a really integral part of our stories that we share as we're on these campaign trails. Even if you are running for a city council seat where you're not tasked with challenging those big things, being willing to lead with your values as you go through that. The next question we have is also for you, Kat. This is especially important when we think of the theme of balance. A lot of people asked, how do we keep our kids involved? And I know you have 3 children, I think that's right. And I know that you talked a bit about how you involve them in your campaign, while also wanting to make sure that we're protecting our children as we go and do these things. I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience with that.
Absolutely, yeah. So I have a 6, 8, and 10-year-old. And what really helped with us is getting their buy-in, right? And that started with just advocacy in the community, that why are we staying after school an hour for the community council meeting? Because I care about your education and I want to make sure that these decisions are going to benefit you and your brother and sister at this school. And the same thing of going up to the Capitol for a rally. Like, why are we here? Because healthcare is essential, and your dad has epilepsy. And if we don't have health insurance, we can't get his medication. So this is personal to our family. And we're here because we love dad. And so really putting it in words that they understand. And I think my youngest is 6. So that means we've been canvassing for 4 years before I ran for other women in the community. And that was just something I said, you know what? There aren't as many women in office. And so we support women. That's what we do for equality. And I talk to my son a lot about it too, of it's about gender equality. He loves babies. Oh my gosh, my little boy loves babies. And so it's like, if you want to be a childcare provider or a kindergarten teacher, people should support that, even if that's not a typical boy's job. And so we really talk about how it benefits everyone in the family, and just really normalize what they love about our community and how we're fighting for that. Like, you want a splash pad? Well, we got to make sure Parks and Rec has enough money for that. And mom wants to make sure that we look at the budget carefully, and children are prioritized. And you love walking on the river. We want to make sure the environment is prioritized and we keep it clean. And just really that this is how our family gives back. And so they actually probably canvassed the least for my race of any year, because so many family members felt bad for them. And they were like, we'll take them for a Saturday. Where in previous years, they had to walk every Saturday, because on Saturdays, our family walks. And that's what we do for an hour. And I tell people we volunteer for, don't give us a full list. We got little legs, but we'll take half a list. We'll do some. And it's teaching them that value of how they can impact their community. And it's sometimes you are out late. Like Shireen said, we do miss stuff sometimes. But mom's not going to be at dinner tonight because mom's going to a meeting about what are we going to go build on State Street and what do you think we should put there? Okay, I'll make sure they know what the 8-year-olds in the community want on State Street, and they have that buy-in. And when they have the buy-in, it doesn't feel like you're missing out in that same way because you're all in it together, and it's a family adventure. And just have those conversations, even when they're real little. There's ways to explain to them on their level of how we're being kind to our neighbors.
Absolutely. I love the civics training that you're baking into having them be a part of your campaign and your experience, and the explanation that goes, sometimes we're not going to be able to do it all, right? So explaining where you're devoting your attention and how that relates back to things that they care about. Thank you for sharing that, Kat. This next question is for you, Michelle. It's somewhat related. People asked a lot about how do they negotiate time that they're going to have to dedicate to a campaign or to holding office with a partner. How do you work that out with your husband? And I'll also add to that, if you're willing to add on to negotiations with your husband. Someone asked how you manage that with 5 children. I know your kids are a little bit older, but if you tack that on as well, I think that people would be interested.
Yeah, so 10 years ago when I started all this and won my first political seat, they were littles too. And so everything Kat was saying I could relate to. And it's, for me, I would always think, okay, storytelling. I have to tell them a story because then they'll understand why mom has to go to this public school meeting and has to go meet with these neighbors over this issue about curriculum. And so she really hit it out of the park with her comments on how to bring your family. So the mayor piece, they were a little bit older, but I think they're harder to manage when they're older. They've got a lot of opinions, and they really are your biggest supporters and your biggest fans. And for all of you that have run campaigns that last week, that's just brutal. For me, it was always my family, my husband, that carried me through it, because number one, you're exhausted mentally, physically, you're just done with it all, and yet you have got to cross that finish line. And so my husband has been very supportive. He is, like I said, he's Tongan. English is his second language. I think, honestly, I don't think he knew what he was in for our first campaign. He was shocked at how much work it was, and just the signs and all the logistics of a campaign are a lot. And I hate the sign wars, but it's a real thing and it happens. And I used to drive home from work trying to think, how can I drive home from work and not have to see one of my signs? Because the whole thing is exhausting. But my husband's been very supportive. They're cultural. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Polynesian cultural, but it's very the patriarchal. The man is very much the leader and sits at the head of the table, and all these hilarious things that I had to kind of reteach him. And he was very good about learning. I mean, that's the whole reason they came to America, was for the freedoms that America offers. And so he was very open and very supportive. For those of you that might not know, I was asked to jump on a ticket. I'm in a campaign right now because I love them so much. But I'm on a gubernatorial ticket right now with former Governor John Huntsman, and I'm on as his LG. And again, my husband and my boys came home, and one of my sons has a cut from hammering signs down. I mean, it is, yeah, they probably are not loving me as I sit here and think about it, but it's what you do, and the buy-in matters, and the love matters, and kids, you start from the minute they're born. You've supported them all along the way. You've made sure they're everywhere, and all of a sudden, mom's got this crazy hair idea that she wants to do something. Well, yeah, we're going to rally around her and support her, and so they have been fantastic. But with that said, I mean, I'm just going to be brutally honest. Last night was a council meeting. I was here till 10. I got to the office at 7 a.m., went home at 10 p.m., forgot my phone here. And my kids were annoying me because all my adult children are home because of the pandemic. My husband was annoying me. Last night was not pretty. I went to bed ticked. They went to bed ticked. I was shooting out mean texts about shut the dog up. make sure I don't wake up to a messy kitchen. I mean, that's real life. And that's part of holding the political office, is you just have to figure out, I know they love me, I love them, but it's not all rosy, just FYI. It's a lot of work and sacrifice on all sides.
Thank you so much for that. I think I know that when I look at you three women, I think these women are superstars. They've got it all figured out. And I find it really helpful to be reminded that you're people too, and you're navigating us as you go. Two of the things that you said that I really clung to, especially because I'm seeing some of the comments in the chat about how these patriarchal traditions you refer to them as silly things, because I think when we recognize the power that women bring, it's just so silly to think that we would ever keep them out of these positions of power and leadership, whether that be on a small scale or a grand scale. And then also what you said about retraining. I think that these questions about negotiating partners and children and volunteer time, they're primarily asked to women because we're expected to do it all. And I appreciate you all being able to serve as examples for us to understand how, if we want to run for office, how do we respond to that? How do we engage with it? And thank you for being willing to answer my questions with this. We are getting very close to time. I know that there are lots of questions here. This will be my last directed question, and we'll end with final advice that you each might have for the women who have joined us today. And then we will continue this conversation online. I'll give more information about that. So for the last targeted question, Shireen, I think this one builds on what we just talked about. We talked about working with our children. We've talked about working with partners. And it sounds like there's a lot going on if you're running for office or holding office. How do you make time for yourself? How do you decompress in this fast-moving world where it's full of emotion and energy? I'm curious to see how you would engage with that.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, and I'm a relentless extrovert, so I get recharged in these environments. I get recharged in the connections. I feel, a lot of energy from the work itself, and so I'm lucky in that respect. I also think that we're served well when we have introverts and extroverts and all different kinds of people in office, and really understanding kind of where those boundaries and balance, how that works for each individual person is something we have to figure out. I would say that if you are a person who's really struggling to find time for yourself and feel really overwhelmed by that without having taken this step, but you kind of want to, start figuring out what that practice is today. Is it, I can tell you it's probably not like a deep dive scrolling on Instagram. It's probably, something that allows you to connect with yourself, with your family, with your friends, with nature. Even 10 minutes of quiet time that you have. I remember when I was a new mom, I would put on my makeup every day. I like to do it. And I was like, this is the 5 minutes that people are going to leave me alone. And I'm going to be in this bathroom and I'm just going to relax and do my hair for a few minutes. Whatever it is that brings you that sense of balance and comfort. And if you haven't found it yet, it's going to be really important, because there are difficult moments in campaigns, in holding office, where things come at you like a wave, and you need to know where that place is, what that thing is, how you find balance and comfort. And it's just such a core part, I think, of our ability not to be triggered, not to be sent into a rage, not to be overcome by emotion in a way that shuts us down. So find that connection to your sense of comfort and hold on to that and practice it. And I hope it's not something that takes 2 or 3 hours, because you won't have that kind of time. So I find a way to be efficient in giving yourself a break.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's helpful advice for us if we decide we do want to run for office, or if we just want to live well. I also really appreciated that you identified this should be something intentional with people that we love, with nature, with calm, and not just the scroll that we can all get locked into. So thank you so much for sharing that. We are very close on time, so I will ask that remarks to this final question be brief, but I think that there's a lot of power in the brevity for this specific question. And that is, this is your parting words with this group of women, what's the most important advice that you could give as we exit? And thank you again so much for being here today. So we'll start with how it is ordered on my screen. We'll hear from Kat, then Mayor Kaufusi, then Shireen.
Okay. I would just start with, you're an expert in something. And we sometimes worry about those that are already elected to represent us, that they know so much. They don't. You're an expert in something that no one in that room knows about and understands how important it is and how it works. And so to just really feel empowered by that, to make sure your voice is heard, and whether that is to be reaching out to those who are already elected, to help those who share your core beliefs to get elected. If you're thinking about running, but you're not sure yet, help someone else with theirs. Look in your area, whether it's city council, school board, state representative seats. You'll learn so much about how you want to run your own race. You'll learn so much about the process, to really like core beliefs and storytelling, to also like what kind of flyers are easier to hang on doors. And just those really practical things. But if you want it, you're ready. There's not a right time to run for office. There's not a right time to have a baby. It's you know, just, you can do it. And when women run, they win at almost the same rate as men. We just have to run. And reach out to those that are in office, because most of us are really excited to talk to you and tell you why you're awesome and you should do it. So I won't go too long right now, but if you wanted to reach out, I'd tell you how awesome you are one-on-one.
Thank you so much, Kat. I love that. Mayor Kaufusi.
Okay, I'll just be really brief here, but I just want you all to know that what you bring to the table when you win that position and you get to raise your hand and have the vote, it matters. And all of us are diverse. All of us have different opinions, but that's the beauty of our system. I love hearing everybody's opinion. I love having someone say, Mayor, you're wrong. And I love to be told, how am I wrong? And then be able to go back and forth and then walk out of there friends and on the same page. Your opinion matters. The diversity is critical to managing this crazy political system. Women bring a unique nurturing and desire that it's hard to find in men. And so we need you. We need you at the table. And just a plug for Provo, I need friends. So anyone that's willing to jump in, I will help you and support you. And I appreciate the fact that you're all on this call means that you care. So thank you, and know your opinions matter, and get out there and go for it and win that seat so you can have a vote.
Absolutely. I second that a million times over. We need you. I hope that you all hear that when she extends that invitation. All right, we'll close out with you, Shireen.
So 2 things really quickly. I'm sure you've heard the saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Really thinking about what it means to be at the table, having your voice, having that ability to work on policies that matter to your life is crucial. So understand that. It does matter. It's important to support candidates. It's important to volunteer and find those roles in your community. It's also important to have a seat at the table. And the other thing that I would say really quickly is I find that a lot of women that I talk to who are thinking about this journey have spent a lot of time creating a narrative in their own heads with their own voice about why they're unable or unqualified to do that. I need you to tell that voice to knock it off, because it will stop you before anyone around you will question your ability or your capacity to lead. You can lead. You can run for office. You can run for office and fail. I did, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. So know that you need to start with that voice in your head and say, you know, I've had enough. I know I can do this. I'm going to need you on the team. So making sure that we're practicing telling ourselves that we can do it and telling those around us that they're ready to go too.
Incredible. Thank you 3 so much. This has been such a valuable opportunity for us to learn from you. I have seen so many people active in the chat, so many active in the Q&A. Just know that this conversation does not end when we leave this webinar. If you go to sheshouldrun.org, we have our community available. You can go to the top right-hand corner and join the community. We have a discussion board specifically dedicated to these Road to Run conversations. We want to be able to hear from you, your experiences, and answer some of the questions that maybe we didn't get to today. So again, if you go to sheshouldrun.org, the top right-hand corner, and look at the community, we're eager to continue this conversation with you. A huge thank you again to Mayor Kaufusi, County Councilmember Shireen Ghorbani,
All right, thank you guys so much for participating in this Road to Run. Thank you, ladies, for your insight and advice. Like Jarinette said, we will continue the conversation in our community. I really encourage you to follow these ladies and continue following their journeys and join us for the conversation. And with that, we will say goodbye.
Thank you.